questioner. I don't know about Ms. Sanchez, but I think we have Mr. Armstrong on our side. Then I'll give the ranking member a couple minutes for some thank yous and closing comments. I'll just take a minute or two, and then we'll be done. So if we can hang with us. Mr. Armstrong is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Upstairs, the CDC director is testifying in front of an oversight committee hearing. And when I get a chance to go up there, I'm going to ask them about the CDC using taxpayers' data to buy location on American citizens to see if they comply with COVID lockdown. And down here, we're talking about censorship and social media. And the reason I bring those two things up is because I think the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment are what make the United States unique in the world. There's no other government on this planet that has such robust protections of both speech and privacy. They've also held up and been incredibly resilient throughout the course of time. The Fourth Amendment has dealt with listening devices and drones and telephoto lenses. And the First Amendment, you talked about Skokie versus Illinois. The problem is I don't know if they survive the digital age, not without Congress's help. And we're going to deal with the Fourth Amendment and privacy and all of that. But the First Amendment means that the government has no power to restrict expression because of its message, its ideas, its subject matter, or its content. Thurgood Marshall, pretty smart guy. And the problem we run into with the government's current and extensive efforts to censor speech on social media comes down to a few essential questions. What is permissible speech? And who decides what's permissible speech? So we've talked about it, and we've alluded to it, and we've written a report about it. But I want to talk just really briefly. Mr. Schellenberger, what is the Election Integrity Partnership? What is it?
So the Election Integrity Partnership was, the idea for it came from the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It was a collaboration of 4 NGOs, really led by Stanford Internet Observatory, to flag content and urge the social media platforms to censor it in one way or another, whether to take it down or put a label on it or throttle it.
And the government was involved in funding it and creating it?
Correct.
Was it effective?
As we were discussing, it resulted in action on 30. I mean, the platforms responded 75% to 75% of the content that was being flagged by the EIP, and then in 35% of those cases, they took action.
Mr. Taibbi, you earlier wanted to jump in on this subject, and I'm going to allow you an opportunity to talk. The question is was the government involved and engaged in censoring speech leading up to the 2020 election?
Yes, I think so, absolutely. I mean, through the EIP and through a variety of other means. I think it's also worth pointing out, you brought up the purchasing of geolocation data. Many of the companies that do social media monitoring are also in the business of selling geolocation data to the government. So it's a very similar pattern, even though there's been a Supreme Court ruling that says that you can't get geolocation data without a warrant. I believe it was Carpenter v. United States,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. It subsequently came out that multiple agencies were doing that anyway through middleman companies, and this is basically the same pattern that we see with speech with groups like the EIP or CTIL. It's essentially a workaround, a legal workaround.
Well, and I think we're going to the and it didn't quit in 2020. We're going to get to that, but I mean, the problem is we define misinformation and disinformation very differently. And what I've come to figure out what it means from the government is anything critical of the government. But it's already evolved from that. You know, I sat in Brennan's transcribed interview, and he just blatantly said, I don't care if it's true or not. And in June of 2021, CISA's Countering Foreign Influence Task Force created a mis, dis, and malinformation team, the MDM team. What is malinformation, Mr. Schellenberger?
That's accurate information that could lead people to have the wrong conclusion. So the main example of this is often true stories of vaccine side effects that might lead people to be hesitant about taking the vaccine.
So not only were they censoring information they deemed to be inaccurate, they were censoring accurate information, and they're continuing to do it now.
Not only that, but both CTIL and the leaders of the Stanford Internet Observatory emphasized that malinformation was the main event. Stopping narratives was the main event. It was their main focus. The smaller stuff, the inaccurate tweets That was less of a concern. They were really focused on the big objectives, in this case, making sure people took the vaccines.
So an agency funded and created by the government, a partnership funded and created by the by the government's number one stated goal is to censor true information.
And whole narratives, whole ways of thinking.
That should terrify everybody, Democrat, Republican, independent, young, old, anybody else.
May I add
yield back.
May I add one thing, Congressman?
Sure.
Which is just that if the Democrats are very, very concerned about President Trump, I would ask them, if they're so concerned about President Trump, would you want him to control the censorship apparatus? Would you want that, given all the things that you've said? Would you like him to be able to call Twitter and Facebook and all these other platforms and demand that they censor content? Doesn't seem consistent to me.
Well said. The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member for a closing comment, and then we'll close the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the witnesses for being here.
I too want to thank our witnesses. Ms. Troy, thank you for being here. Ms. Subramana, thank you. You said just a few minutes ago that this is about Western civilization. I think the gentleman from North Dakota said it well. The First Amendment, Fourth Amendment are at the heart of that. And that's why we're doing this. So thank you. And frankly, I think I just met you today, but you strike me as almost too nice, because it's not debanking, it's stealing, it's taking. They're taking someone's property, and that's what they did to this guy who served in the Canadian amount of police, and what they frankly are. I hope doesn't ever happen in this country. But thank you for being here. It was very good. And to our witnesses, Mr. Type, Mr. Schellenberg, thank you for coming back. I think the Democrats said that. This is like a quarterly thing. I think we should make it a quarterly thing. I mean, the First Amendment and Fourth Amendment are that darn important. But for your work a year ago, you two guys and a few others, I don't know that we'd have all the information we have. So, someday someone's going to write the history books, and they're going to recognize folks like you who are willing to stand up, frankly, coming from the other party, because most of the censorship has been against conservatives and Republicans, but someone Democrat, and I'm against all of it. They're going to write, when they write the history, they're going to say these two guys stepped forward, along with a few others, to bring this to make the country aware of this. And then we have done now 4 reports on CISA, on the FTC, on this gyro ticketing system that the EIP and the Stanford, all these guys are working on. And others but it started there. So again, thank you, and we'll have you back if you'll come. We'll definitely have you back too, Ms. Subramania. You were great. So thank you all for being here, and that concludes today's hearing.
Thank you.